Wednesday, everyone. It is the Sisters Interview, and tonight we have a very special guest, Baron Aeron Corrino of On Tier, who is a passionate devotee of Elizabethan theater costuming. He also happens to be the student of my squire, Duchess Inga. So we're sort of related in a weird sort of way. And welcome very much. I guess I forgot to introduce ourselves. I'm Rithkin, and my sister is Shaxi. As always, we're here to co-host and to take you on a wild ride and get to know someone super fascinating from the Kingdom of On Tier. So welcome. So we usually start these things with your SCA origin story. So if you could start there, that would be great.
It was a little bit of a start and stop thing. I was first exposed to the SCA while in college, back at CMU in Pittsburgh. They were this weird group that would hang out on the lawn at college and fence and dress in funny clothes. And we all kind of saw them as we were going to classes or rehearsals, but none of us in the theater department ever really had the free time to do anything outside the theater department, so didn't really know what they were. After college, I had done some sewing work for a few people in the SCA, along with some other different reenactment groups. So I had a little bit better of an understanding of them, but it wasn't until 2001 when someone I was dating at the time ill-advisedly thought that the salvation of a relationship barely on life support was going to be going on a camping trip. Spoiler alert, that's not a good idea, just for the record, but.
Was it Penzic?
Yes, it was. Oh. SCA existence started from the deep end of the pool and worked backwards. You know, I know a lot of people who, the minute you say Penzic to them, they get this sort of glow in their eyes, like one day they want to go there. And I'm like, you could just go. I started there and sort of worked backward, but we went, not really sure at the time why I agreed to, because I was not a big fan of camping at the time, but I went. It rained 10 out of the 14 days we were there. And despite the demise of a relationship and everything being soaked repeatedly, I still fell in love with the experience. And I met a group of people that I still camp with to this day, many of whom are now chosen friends and family. But that was how I kind of got my foot in the door. I didn't really graduate from Christmas and Easter skating and going to Penzic and Gulf Wars and Estrella until I got out here to On Tier in 2004. And I started using the SCA as a way to build a base of acquaintances, because moving across country, I knew one or two people here in Seattle, but really not much. So the SCA was the first way of meeting people once I got out here. And it's been, you know, diving into the eyeballs ever since. One of the pictures that you have in the roster of tonight is god awful. It's the first event that I went to here in On Tier, 12th night up in Bellingham in January of 2005. And I cringe every time I see the outfit that I'm in, because, you know, it's bad. It's fun, but it's.
Well, you know, it's not as bad as what we wore.
I was gonna say, we all come from somewhere. I think one of my first events, I wore my boyfriend's kilt, and I sat down next to Anne Marie, who is a Pelican who doesn't play much anymore, but back in the day she played a lot.
And Laurel.
Yes, Anna Laurel, sorry. Mm-hmm. And she like sort of looks at me and goes, "What's this all about?" we all start there, so yeah.
And anyway. I can totally picture Anne Marie having that sort of Karen Walker moment. Honey, what is this? What's the story?
She was super nice. I don't mean to, yeah.
Oh no,
super nice.
It's just in my mind, I can totally hear it with that Karen Walker tone of, what's going on, honey? What is this?
Yeah.
was your thought with this?
So what brought you out to Ontier?
I had been ready to leave Pittsburgh for a while. At that point, it was really in a cultural decline. The economy was about to crash, and I had gotten out of that relationship, and I just felt like it stagnating. And I had visited Seattle in the past, so I knew I liked the area. And a friend was moving out here. She was divorcing her husband and moving back here to reconnect with her roots. And she said, "You want to come with me?" And I was able to transfer my job from Pittsburgh to here, which was really the only reason I was willing to make the move. I didn't want to do it unless I knew I had a job waiting for me on this end.
That's smart.
P.S. I do not recommend seeing the country from the cab of a Penske truck sitting next to someone who is this far from their divorce, as you listen to Tori Amos over and over, over and over, all across the country.
It is a really beautiful drive, though. I've done that drive because I went to college in Ohio, and it's so beautiful to go through the Badlands, and everybody stops at Mount Rushmore and the Devil's Peak. Is that what that is?
I think it is. Yeah. The novelty had worn off by the time I was ready to be done with the transit portion of that adventure. But long and short of it was, I ended up here, and I knew within a week or two that it was the right choice. I have not regretted the move out here at all since then. I love it out here.
It's pretty magical. For people that have never been here, I grew up in Southern California, and when you first come to Seattle and you see how green everything is all the time, it's like otherworldly. It really is.
And the whole myth about the rain, I pointed out, because there were a lot of people who kept saying, "You're going to leave Pittsburgh and go there where it rains all the time." And statistically, it actually rains more in Pittsburgh than it does here. It's just they get it in a monsoon season where you can go for 2 weeks where it'll rain from sunup to sundown, torrential rain, unrelenting. Yeah. Whereas here we have the nice, passing showers, every 5 minutes you get a new version of weather.
Yeah. And people totally take advantage of when the sun comes out. It's amazing. So
yeah, we went for a walk tonight, and everyone was out on their porch, and there was music blaring from every radio. I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy.
Spring has sprung.
I got the doors and windows open, letting fresh air in. I'm loving it. So absolutely.
Super cool. So did you latch on to anyone as a mentor when you first came to Ontier?
Mentor, not as much. Well, socially. The first people that I really got to know were our local Baron and Baroness at the time, Ragnar and Bergdis. And they were pretty instrumental in getting me introduced into the barony. I had started going to Madrona socials and then also the business meetings. And it was through them, because they geographically lived very near me, so I would catch a ride to the event, to those socials and the meetings with them, and so got to know them personally as well as within the SCA, and it kind of built from that point outward.
That's awesome. Bergdis was one of the early people for me, and she has no idea, I'm sure, but I just always admired her demeanor and the way that she seemed to handle things. So she's kind of an example for me early on too. I like her. So you got kind of involved in the barony, and did you end up taking on any offices?
Not initially. I competed in a few of the baronial A&S championships, early days. I didn't take on an office actually until it was further down the line with Stefan and Emelina. And that I won as ANS champion for them when Morgan Donner was passing the torch as the outgoing ANS champion. And then after my year as champion, when I stepped down and passed the torch off to Isolt, I became the ANS minister for Madrona, and I've had that office pretty much since then.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's a
Wow.
long time. I think we're, well, no, I guess we're still on the Baron and Baroness after them. So
This year will be 6th year.
Yeah.
Long
time.
And in general, it has not been at all a task. The thing that I sort of took over and made my own was the actual administration of the championship, because the thing that I kind of saw was that artisans are best at being artisans. They're often not great at being administrators. And I don't mean that as a knock. It's just that's often not a skill set that they're worrying about developing while they're working on their art. And it falls on the outgoing champion to sort of set the terms of how the championship is going to happen. And they often were the ones tasked with finding the judges and setting up the judging sessions, a lot of nuts and bolts administrative stuff. So when I took over as ANS minister, I basically said, you know what, you guys go be artists. You drum up enthusiasm for the competition, talk about your art, drum up support for the arts and the barony. I'll deal with the mechanics of getting judges, scheduling the actual judgings, and administering the competition for you so that you can just be an artisan and not have to try and wear 2 hats and juggle 2 chainsaws simultaneously. And so until COVID happened, that's what I had been doing mainly for the barony, was overseeing the ANS championship and supporting whoever the champion was. Their excellencies have decided that they want to change how we do the selection process for a champion and make it a little less competition-like, move away from the Kingdom ANS competition model. But we never really got a chance to implement the plan, because right after we said, yeah, let's do this, it's cool, it'll take competition out of this, COVID happened. So we haven't been able to do it yet.
have you guys talked at all about maybe doing an online one? Because I just in the back of my head, I've been thinking, like, if there's something that we could do, like, that would, continue our championships and stuff, it would be the art ones online,
We had talked about it, but their excellency is really, because of the nature of how they've chosen to shift the formatting, it really relies a lot on in-person interaction, both letting the competitors have time where they're actually kind of emulating Athenaeum in a way that at a couple of events within the barony, anyone wanting to be considered for a champion position will present a table, and they'll be at the table with their work, and they can talk about it, and people can then give the Baron and Baroness feedback on their impressions of the person. But the Baron and Baroness will also have sit-down chats with that person about their presentation, about their view on the arts and what they'd like to do with them in the barony. And since so much of it really hinges on personal interactions at events, they didn't really want to try and force it to be an online thing its first time out of the gate. If it had been something we had established better before COVID, we might have made the attempt, but we felt it needed to have its maiden voyage in person.
Yeah, I'm not judging, and I'm. Yeah.
We discussed it a couple of times at Perennial Curious. Was it something that we wanted to try? But since our current champion was more than happy to hold down the fort through COVID, we figured we'll ride it out and, approach it fresh when we can actually come together in person again.
And focus on Athenaeum.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then there's that too.
Which, I think Charles talked us both into doing. So we are both doing that. And I know you're part of a huge part of the team, right?
I'm the event steward for it. So ringleader, project manager. I have a team that are absolutely bar none amazing. I will wholly own, I am not a tech guru. I kind of understand up to a point what they're doing and how they're doing it, but there's a lot of nuts and bolts technical stuff that I very much lean on them for, and they are amazing at that. I kind of view myself as more of a den mother cheerleader, and I try and focus on the artisan Facebook group and helping to answer questions, keep them engaged, help connect them with people if they're having problems or questions, sort of a cruise director Julie in regards. And also answer questions for people outside the process who want to know how they can participate come the day of, if they're interested in seeing what's going to be presented and what they can and cannot do, or how they can do it.
How they can interact with entries.
Yeah.
And you have rooms that people can go to discuss kind of general topics too. Is that going to be the same this year?
We had a lot of really great feedback last year about the salons.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to continue them, but we're going to actually, since we're doing Athenaeum over 2 days instead of 1 this year, we don't have a clock hanging over us quite. So, as I jokingly refer to it, the clock of Damocles hanging by a thread over us. So we're going to let the salons run longer so that conversations can happen a little bit more organically, and people don't have to be watching a clock to make sure they get their things said before they have to run off to the Zoom meeting. But we'll let them flow a little bit better that way, I think. One of the other things that we're going to offer, though, is a way that the virtual Athenaeum can kind of mimic the in-person Athenaeum, because the thing that we all kind of commented on loving was that as you were walking around the space at an in-person Athenaeum, you could stop and listen to conversations already in progress and pick up nuggets of information. And it wasn't like you had to be at a set point for a presentation. You could just meander and sample, and it was very organic that way. So what we're going to offer, in addition to the one-on-one requested chat sessions with artisans, we're going to let artisans who want to do this is not a requirement, but if any of them want to have sort of a larger forum conversation, we're going to let them have a salon room where multiple people can come and just listen to them talk and interact with them. So it's more of a group discussion instead of a one-on-one, and let the conversations flow that way as well, and be unscripted. So it's not necessarily a themed salon. The artisan gets to drive the conversation and talk about their work, but multiple people can interact with each other and with the artisan at the same time.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I feel like we took you down this road of talking about your service and we kind of got away from talking about you and your art. So I want to hear you talk about how you got into costuming and how the theater or whatever kind of costuming you were doing before you got into the SCA, how you managed to translate that into SCA costuming, because there's a big difference.
Yes and no, but I went to Carnegie Mellon for theater design with a minor in creative writing. I very quickly realized I liked period dramas and period plays more than I liked contemporary dramas, where you're basically just going out and shopping for real clothes and maybe distressing a little bit or dyeing them a little bit. But to me, it didn't present as much of a creative challenge. And then out of college, I worked with a bunch of different theater companies, almost exclusively working on Shakespeare or Jacobean plays or some restoration plays. But it was always period drama. And loved that, even though not all of them were necessarily set in the period that the play was written in. The one that I cringe the most at is still, and I'll never put it on my resume. I'll tell you the story because it kind of feeds into an aspect of the Shakespeare research I've been doing. But I worked on a production of Midsummer Night's Dream for Pittsburgh Public Theater. Would have been late 90s, not quite 2000. And the director had this concept that he was going to cast all of the fairies, including Titania and Oberon and Puck, as children. Titania was, I believe, 16, Oberon was 15, Puck was 13, and the fairies ranged in age between, I think the youngest was about 9, and wow, was she ever one of those classic theater brats with a stage mom. But that's neither here nor there. And the oldest of the fairies was, I think, 14. Interesting concept, until you think about the mechanics of the play and some of the very adult themes in conversation between Oberon and Titania. But even more importantly, the scenes later on where Titania is falling in love with a guy who's got an ass's head, who is being played by an adult who is easily 3 times her age. It was cringeworthy from start to finish. It looked beautiful. I mean, we designed the ever-loving hell out of that. I mean, I didn't design it. I was a pattern draper for the costumes, but we all worked our fingers to the bone on the design aspect of it. But I think partially that was because we were trying to invest some scrap of integrity in a show that we knew was going to get blasted out of the water the minute the critics saw children walking on stage playing opposite full-grown adults 2 and 3 times their age, and where that was likely to go.
Yikes.
Yeah, a lot of yikes. But I'd worked on the theater productions, and then as I'd mentioned, I'd done some sewing work for a few people in the SCA at that time. I also made some pieces for performers in Pennsylvania Renaissance fairs at the time. So getting closer, straddling theater and period a little bit differently than you would for stage, because it has to exist outside, more akin to an SCA event in terms of how it's going to get used and worn. And I've also worked for some Civil War reenactors and some Revolutionary War reenactors. And bar none, the toughest crowd to work for, hands down, are the Civil War reenactors. Never going back there again. But throughout all of it, I maintained the love of working on Shakespeare's era, not just his. I've worked on a couple of Ben Jonson productions as well, and really enjoyed those, though I tend to prefer Shakespeare's writing style. And even in the early days when I was getting my feet into the SCA, I was still always thinking of my persona idea early on through the lens of someone who started out playing on the stage. And particularly, I've got this voice. I sound like my mother. I've always sounded like my mother. It's never gone away. You know, I could try and butch it up, but I was like, you know, in reality, I'd have been one of the boy players who was playing the female parts until I could no longer pull it off. So what I found interesting was the notion of, what if it was someone who never necessarily completely let go of that paradigm and continued doing it, even though well into adulthood. And so all of the things that I was making early on, I was at least initially kind of thinking of them as stuff that would have been costume, because the line between costume and clothing in many ways was much more blurred back then, because they were often taking secondhands and things that were donated by patrons, because a lot of the actors had patrons independently and would be gifted pieces of clothing that they could then use, so that it wasn't necessarily as purpose built as modern theater costuming is. I almost think of it more akin to movie costumes, where they go out and rent a bunch of stuff and slightly alter it to fit whatever is going to be happening. That was probably a lot more akin to what was happening in the time period with the costuming.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No.
That's just such a unique way to approach sort of like persona, or like what you're going to do in the SCA. I think it's amazing. It really is. And your costumes are so dramatic and so stunning. I mean, anybody that plays an on-tier has to know who you are, because your costume, I mean, you can't, I mean, it's just amazing. Even in a field, I mean,
yeah. There's always that moment of,
yeah.
I tend not to walk quietly onto the on-tier stage. Let's put it that way.
True. That's very true. Oh, I just lost it. I'm sorry.
Well, I think the loudest one, though, has to be the heraldic. That one just screams from a good football field away in any given direction, which, you know, I kind of intended that one for that purpose.
Do we want to look at some pictures and talk about the clothes?
Sure.
Okay. Can we see that?
I can see it.
Okay.
That would have been 12th night. I can't remember which year, but it was the one and only time you'll ever catch me wearing all white. Spoiler alert, white is not a slimming color, ever. Unless you are built like a broomstick already. And I think I was strapped in within an inch of my life in that one. But I had lots of fun, and Inga was queen at that point. The rose that is pinned to the doublet was a gift from her. And I actually still have that rose dried and in a little shadow box frame hanging on my wall.
I think that must have been 2010.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I have hung on to that particular rose ever since the event. It is not nearly as bright in color now as it was then. But I still love that I have it.
And do you make all of your accessories too, your ruff and all of your necklaces? And...
The ruffs, yes. Generally the stuff that I don't make, I'll make smocks and undershirts. I really hate doing them because they're mind-numbingly boring in my brain. So unless there's something weird or I need it to be a particular color, I usually will just buy a linen smock from someone else who makes them much better than I do, or faster. Necklaces, that's sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Mhm.
There's a few that I can tell I'm wearing two there that yes, I did string them myself, but I'm also wearing a strand of pearls in that were a gift, and another that was an award necklace that I was given.
Very cool. These are not in good order. I tried, but did not. And this is not you.
No, that is a piece that I made for a friend of mine, Christos, who has since passed away. He died of cancer. I have the coronet that he is wearing. That is the coronet that Stirkar and Stjarna, in conjunction with Siegfried and Elizabeth, surprised me with when they gave me my court baronetcy, and I nearly passed out when I got that coronet.
Aww.
Because Linda Cooper, who has also since passed away of cancer, she had inherited it from Christos, and she gave it up to pass it on to me when I got my court baronetcy. But that outfit is one of the outfits that I nearly had a heart attack making, because that silk, where you see the gold embroidery, that's actually from Italy, and it was a chunk of silk that was, I think it was maybe 2 yards at best, and then he had sent me another length of plain silk to fill in with. But that silk was about $180, $190 a yard, and it had a huge pattern repeat on it, and it's actually embroidered, and it's gold metal thread. And anyone who's worked with machine embroidered fabric knows that there's a little bit of flex and weirdness with the scale of patterns. So I was like, I had one shot at cutting that and getting it right, or the whole thing was screwed. So I pounded a couple of shots of espresso the day it was going to happen. And I opened a brand new package of shears. So I had untouched blades going down on that fabric, and just cranked the music and started cutting once the caffeine kicked in, because I was scared snotless of cutting that fabric. But there's a couple pictures in here of things that I have made for Christos, because Christos would very often be voluntold to sew for royals back in East Kingdom, and so would often not get to make things for Penzik. So I ended up making him a couple of things to wear new at Penzik, and that dress was one of them. I do actually enjoy doing calligraphy as well, and this was a piece that I did for Siegfried and Elizabeth for their step down at their second on their second reign. Because the thing that had sort of struck me is that when you're sitting on the throne, your reign is defined so much by giving other people awards and marker points for their career and their existence within the SCA, but the crowns themselves are often not getting something that denotes noteworthy marker points in their SCA career. So I did that one for them because their second reign marked, I believe it was the 10-year anniversary of North Shield as a kingdom. And so, and Siegfried got to bookend the first decade of North Shield because he was the first king when it became a kingdom with a completely different queen. And then at the end of this reign, when he stepped down, he was bookending that first decade of North Shield as a kingdom.
This is just stunning. So you did the calligraphy and the illumination?
I did. And then I sent it. I didn't let them know that this was coming. I sent it to a friend and sort of co-shenanigator out there so that it could be put out at the event. And down the right and left hand side, those are all signatures of everybody who attended the event for their step down, so that they had the signatures of everyone who was there to witness their step down instead of them signing a scroll.
I love that. Love that. So Katrine asks if you have your own YouTube channel.
I do not. I've had a number of people ask if I do videos of myself working, and I don't have a process that is very filming friendly. I tend more to take photos as I take breaks. So there'll be, 20 photos of a particular project spanned out over a 2-week period of time as I push it a little bit further and a little bit further. But I don't tend, the places where I sit and sew are not places that are also conducive to good filming. So I don't know that I'd really be able to give people a quality viewer experience by doing that. And I honestly, it would feel weird to me trying to think about cheating for the camera and changing my process for the camera, as opposed to focusing on the work immediately in front of me.
And there's a meditative kind of, I don't know about for you, but for me, there's this meditative place I can get into when I'm working that I just don't think I could get into if I were conscious of a camera.
Yes. I mean, I have talked with Isolt, who has offered to do filming, and on 1 or 2 of the upcoming Shakespeare pieces that I'm working on, I may do a couple of little videos, like particularly I cartridge pleat a sort of weird way compared to how you normally get taught. So I may do a video, and she has offered to film because she's got a really good camera, and it would mean there was someone else who could be thinking about the angle, the lighting, and how to best show it. So I wouldn't have to be necessarily changing my approach as much. But we have to get to a point where it's safe for people to be in one another's presence to be able to do that. So it is in the back of my head, and I am considering it. It's just not something that is as organic to me. I'm very jealous of how Morgan Donner has sort of cracked that process and figured out how to present her work in a video format. Because I do think it is a really amazing way of presenting what you're working on and letting people have a window into your process. It's just, that's not how my work process has evolved yet.
I was gonna say, like, she's who I thought of, and every time I watch one of her videos, I'm like, wow, how does she look so cute while she's, cutting and stuff? Because I know I look like my hair is everywhere and I'm sweaty, and yeah.
And the other thing, you'd have to be conscious of the fact, I wholeheartedly own sewer's Tourette's is a thing. I have cut fabric like there's no tomorrow. I have threatened percussive maintenance to my sewing machine on a regular basis. And I have sworn at my dressmaker's dummies on the regular. And that isn't always viewer audience material that you want out there.
Very entertaining.
Sure, yes. But it tends to verge into the territory of purple prose at times. The dress you're seeing there is Duchess Elizabeth's Laurel Elevation dress. She and I go way back. I didn't actually meet her until I went to Penzic. We camped together, but we had discovered that we were going to the same goth and industrial nightclubs in Pittsburgh at the same time, and we remembered seeing one another, even though our friend groups didn't quite overlap. And so if you were to zoom in on that, and I think there are some close-up photos later on in this.
I don't know how to zoom.
Don't worry, I know I sent you some close-up photos of this dress. It is the embroidery on there. It's done with a machine, but I designed the embroidery pattern, and it's taken from an extant period fabric, but I swapped out the pomegranate motif that was in the center and put a skull in there, because Liz and I have the long-standing goth running jokes. So there needed to be a little bit of a reference to our past in the goth community hidden within that dress.
That's fantastic.
That was an early foray into making the Venetians. That one is for Iseult. And if memory serves, I think that is actually what I jokingly refer to as my every woman dress underneath, because I've put that dress, I made it for myself in like 9 hours before a 12th night. The bodice is one piece and the skirt is one giant piece. But I've put it on radically different sized people when I loaned it out, and it magically fits a very, very wide range of physiques, because Iseult is considerably taller than I am, and it still worked.
Wow.
But I'd made her the Venetian overdress, the ladder lacing dress. And yeah, that is now that I see the sleeves, the white sleeves, I know that is the every woman dress underneath, acting as the foundation base for it. But she and I have the long-standing joke that we share a color palette, because we've sort of migrated into doing everything in black, white, and red with gold accent.
Everything's interchangeable that way.
It's like period Garanimals then.
Thank you for knowing that reference.
Yes. The outfit that Steercart is wearing there, I had offered to help out the team working on garb for their reign, because a lot of the people involved were much more accustomed to doing the earlier Norse style clothing, which has a different sewing approach. And so they were looking for people who did late period to step in and help out. So I got sent the fabric for the under doublet, that sort of bone colored linen with the brown diagonal striping. And the pieces were all cut. I had to apply all of those dark brown diagonal stripes onto the linen and then finish the edges. And I put the thing together and then sent it on, and someone else did buttonholes and lacing holes. But that one very quickly became a grudge match with Patience because of sewing 9,005,452 yards of chocolate brown soutache trim onto there. I thought I'd never see the end of it, but I'm happy I did, because I love how much he loves wearing that, and he inhabits it comfortably. It doesn't wear him, he wears it, and he had fun in it and was able to really enjoy playing late period as well as a lot of the beautiful earlier period stuff that he wears.
Yeah, he and Stjarna both, like, they just wear clothes very well.
Yes, I purposely made a piece for her because I wanted her to be able to keep up with him in the late period category. He's a bit of a clothes horse.
It's a little bit of a peacock.
Yes, and with just cause, because
yeah,
they're both pretty coat hangers.
Yes.
That is the base doublet for one of the Shakespeare pieces that I'm currently working on. That's going to be for my Calpurnia, who is going to be all in silver and gray.
Just beautiful.
That one was almost entirely hand sewn because my sewing machine was at the maintenance shop at that point, and I was looking to keep my hands busy. So I ended up hand sewing that while the sewing machine was being serviced and cleaned and parts were updated. Yeah, I kind of, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what kind of sewing machine do you have? What's your main machine?
Oh, I have a simple white. You know, I don't, mostly what I use it for is architectural joining seams, doing 18-mile long hems. Like I will never be that person who is going to do an Elizabethan skirt entirely by hand, because one, there's just too much volume, and 8 or 9 bands of trim around the hem. Okay, I don't need to feel validated by proving to you that I can win that grudge match with patience, or that, you know, I am some little seamstress in a convent. It's a 9 million mile long running straight stitch.
Yeah.
If there's someone who gets joy out of doing that, yay for them. That's not my joy. I've got too many other things to do in life. So stuff like that, I'll do that on machine. There are always going to be things I will hand sew because I'm a control freak, and you have more control hand sewing certain things. But architectural join seams where no one's ever going to see the stitching, I'm all for sewing machine, do it.
Same, absolutely the same.
That was original planning for the Turkish outfit for Duchess Elizabeth, who I made the laurel dress for. Right before COVID happened, she was put on vigil to become a pelican. And she had specifically requested that she wanted Turkish clothing. She loved wearing Turkish herself, and I've loaned her. Many people have seen that sort of amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat Turkish that I have. You can spot it from high orbit because it's no color left behind. And she's borrowed it at a couple of Penzics when it got cold. So she wanted something as bright and similar cut. So I took, and she specifically said she wanted it eye-wateringly bright colors and contrast of texture, pattern. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. And Turkish very much allows for that. They loved large scale patterns and large scale appliques and motifs. So I took straight from extant pieces, the design motifs. I did not use the process that they would have. They did essentially lost space applique, where they would sew the 2 layers down and then cut away the voids. I cut these out and appliqued them down and then couched cord over the edges to finish it. Because I don't think those teeny tiny little wavy pieces would ever have survived if I didn't do the applique double-sided adhesive method of anchoring them in place while I was working the fabric. But that's the level of contrast that she wanted. And it's orange satin on teal linen. So there's also the texture contrast of the matte surface and the shiny surface, in addition to the color contrast of the orange against the teal.
I'm dying over here because you're all up in my color palette.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So
I can't
beautiful.
At that, and I remember it was boiling hot when I was doing this, because this was in June, July. It was right around the 4th of July last year, and oh my God, it was just so hot. I was sweating my butt off while I was doing that.
So beautiful.
I had fun with it. That was the design concept for an outfit that I made for Elizabeth for her step up as queen on that last reign. Christos, who I had made things for before, had sworn that he wanted to make stuff for them if Siegfried ever won crown for her again. He had passed away by this point, but a friend of ours, Elsbeth, out in East Kingdom, sent me a huge length of fabric, which was that basket weave, gold on black, from Christos's stash of fabrics that were left. So I used that to make the dress out of. So he got to be part of it nonetheless. The design changed a little bit in the final execution, but that was the original concept for where we were going to go. That's the dress there at their step down. The big, as we jokingly call it, the Disney villainous purple ruff was an addition that got thrown into the mix for the step down. It wasn't there for the step up, but I had made both of their outfits there. Wow. Yeah, there was a lot of cussing and swearing while I was doing the braid pattern on his doublet, and those sleeves of his with all those teeny tiny pearls. Isolde went out with me to the event, and we were stitching pearls right up until like 3 a.m. before the event on that one.
So one of the things I super love about what you do is that you take into consideration how things are going to stand out and how they're going to contrast and what they're going to look like in court from a distance. And it is so effective. And to me, it doesn't look costumey. It looks very regal, very well done, and super striking. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I tried to make I would like them to have been a little bit more stiff and formal to look like portraits, but the thing is, that's not who Liz and Siegfried are. They needed to be a little bit softer and a little bit more bendable and flexible because they're incredibly interactive with their populace when they were ruling. And so it couldn't be something that was going to constrain them. So I had to sort of curb my initial ideas as to how to approach it and say, no, we need to make sure that this addresses their functional needs as opposed to just strictly period appropriate aesthetics.
I think that that's one of the most important things that people who costume for crowns need to get, is that it's not about you and your talents and your need to make things historical. It's about the royals' needs, and it's about making them comfortable, and it's about making them feel beautiful in what they're wearing so that they can fulfill their role.
And they need to be able to move.
Yeah. And it sounds like you really get that, and that's awesome.
Yes.
But I'm very happy that I get to make things for them because, well, they're family now. So sewing for them is labor of love. So Isolde, when she got put on vigil for Pelican, she came home and she had said she wanted to get back to her SCA roots. And when she had first started playing in the SCA, she was doing the cotardy sideless surcoat, long tippets kind of look. And she wanted her step up outfit as a pelican to reflect that aesthetic. But she has very much always held the design motto of go big or go home. Hats are not allowed to be small with her, just as an FYI, which I love because I like big hats. But in this instance, when I first put that sideless surcoat together, I left a 9-mile train, assuming that we were going to hack some length off of it. But I wanted to have the maximum amount to work with so that we could then determine where we wanted the length to fall. And she walked down the hallway and she just kept walking and walking and walking. And she wasn't saying when, as the fabric's unfurling down the hallway. And I'm like, you're just going to have me knock the corners off this, aren't you? And she's like, yeah, we're keeping the length. But it was fun getting to work with her heraldry, because the panels that have the roses and the chevron stripes, that is her heraldry on there. Her joking nickname amongst our friend group was decorative yet functional. So around the hem, there is that band of trim that is more of the linen, and it alternates the panels, but it has decorative, functional, embroidered in repeat all around the hem.
Oh, wow.
And the headache of that outfit was making it meet at the seam joins so that the word flowed across the seam join perfectly. But we were able to do it.
Wow.
And then at the 12th night after her elevation, we got a group of us together to do the quote unquote train wreck event, where all of us made outfits with ridiculous trains on them. Figuring, if you're at an indoor hotel event, why not have a bunch of ridiculously long trains just for show?
It's amazing.
But I really love that outfit. It's one of the things I'm truly most pleased with. That was my entry within the train wreck group. And I cringe at the fact that I got my own heraldry wrong. I reversed the red and the black because it's supposed to be the sunburst on a quartered background of black and white, and then a red border around it with white heraldic roses in the border. And I'd started making the heraldic roses to go in the border. They just didn't make it onto the dress in time. But I didn't realize until later that I had stupidly reversed the colors of my heraldry. I'm like, for the love of God, seriously?
I thought maybe it was a design choice to stand out more on the dress.
I would love that to be the cover story. However, it was just my own late night, low caffeine fueled stupidity when I was cutting and planning, and I didn't bother to double check myself.
It happens.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And sometimes it results in a really cool design mistake.
Yes.
Sometimes not so much.
I mean, it looks neat. I just wish
Beautiful.
wrong. That is the outfit that I had made for Stjarna. And I purposely made it to be something she could integrate with a piece that had already been made for her. There was a white Zamara, I believe is the term, an Italian sort of overcoat dress. And because there is a complete black and gold underdress to that she could wear on its own or with the white dress that had already been made for her in her reign, it was basically sort of a weekend's worth of clothing without having to pack a ton of different things, because I like it if things feel like living wardrobes, as opposed to I have this one outfit and it has a whole bunch of pieces that only go with it. So that's a packing nightmare. And then I have this other outfit that I'm taking and it has a whole bunch of different pieces and components that go with it that I have to have. And if I forget one piece, the whole thing doesn't work. So I purposely planned that one with the idea that she could combine it with things that had already been made for their reign previous, so that it would make going to an event easier and still look fabulous if she and Steercar both wanted to do a whole event in late period. And I purposely also made it a little shorter than normal and stiffened the hem because she loves to dance. And so I wanted to make sure she was going to be able to dance in it without having to fight the fabric, but that it would also twirl out and make a graceful display when she spun. So she has the stiffened hem on that to do that.
I love how thoughtful you are, and you consider all of their, all the things they like to do, and that the clothing is going to work for them.
This actually got made prior to the train wreck event. I love the one, I think it's Bronzino. I can't remember. It's an Italian portrait from, I believe, the 1530s. And most people would recognize the dress because it's what was used as inspiration for Liz Taylor's final dress in Taming of the Shrew. The tomato red and goose turd green velvet with the stripes cut together in alternating panels. I love that dress. However, finding those two colors is difficult. And the number of people who want to wear those two colors together is also a little bit more limited. And Bergdies, knowing I was making it for her, I wanted something that was softer and more inviting color scheme. So I went with the sky blue and the moss green as the way of interpreting it. But I was very happy with how that one turned out, and she looks adorable in it whenever she wears it. So I'm very happy with that one. That is the pelican cloak, the short hood cape that went with Isolt's elevation outfit. I dithered over that applique and embroidery for a while, because the thing that's always annoyed me about heraldic pelicans is that they look nothing like an actual pelican. They look like this weird bird, and it just bugged me. So I really wanted a design that looked more like a true pelican. And at the time I was working in a frame shop, and someone brought in a piece that was the Pacific Northwest Native American tribal designs. And it kind of clicked in my head to use an aesthetic similar to that when creating the pelican design. And it all just sort of fell into place very quickly once I had that lens to look through. And I love that pelican design, and I'm actually retranslating that again into Siegfried's Turkish outfit and giving it more of a Middle Eastern aesthetic.
I love the beak, because it's a pelican beak.
I wanted it to be from a distance what bird that is, because otherwise it can just look, someone might think it was a heraldic bird. This, right off the bat, that's a pelican. From 50 yards away, that says pelican, and it tells you her station if she's wearing it.
Cool.
That was Rafaela's elevation gown. I had a hell of a lot of fun making that one. Though jokingly, what I had even more fun making were the hair horns that we dressed her hair around, because when you're making them and they're lying flat on your table, they don't look as big as you think. And then when you actually put them on the head, you realize that they're in Maleficent territory. But she absolutely had a hoot wearing them and wore the ever-loving daylights out of them. And at the dinner after her elevation, they ended up getting passed around, and so many people wore them and took pictures with the hair horns on. It was hysterical.
She was magnificent. I think you made her feel so beautiful.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite dresses I have ever seen anyone wear.
I loved how that fabric that she chose just glowed in the late afternoon sunlight, because it is slightly a double shot. It is mostly orange, but there is a gold woven into it the other direction, independent from the gold of the brocade. And you really noticed it a lot when she was in that afternoon sunlight and moving, and the breeze would catch the dress and the folds would flutter in the breeze. I really loved the way that played with light.
It's just gorgeous.
Another view of steer car without the leather jerkin over it. You can see all the 18 million diagonal stripes on that one. That was one of the last things that I made for someone else before COVID lockdown. Trevor was wanting to make something similar to my heraldic outfit. And so we had been ping-ponging Facebook messages back and forth leading up to Kingdom Arts and Sciences. Well, actually, it was 12th night before Kingdom Arts and Sciences, right before COVID. And it didn't come together. You know, he and a friend were trying to put it together themselves, and I was talking them through how to do certain things. So after 12th night, he came over and we sort of finessed what they had started into that doublet, and then I made the pair of trunk hose to go with it. And he had wanted to fight for me in the rapier tourney at our last, as it turns out, our last Kingdom event before COVID, Kingdom A&S. And so that was his outfit, and I made him the hat as well. But I sort of very consciously leaned into making it so that it would look like a fun counterpiece to the heraldic outfit I was wearing, without being a sort of couple's ice skating outfit where they were 100% matching.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. The flame dress. That was the first one that I made where I just started leaning hard into storytelling with an outfit, and sort of giving the nod to my love of the macabre and the memento mori and the witch trials. I embroidered the scarlet letter A from my heraldry, only stuck a skull in the middle of it. But it's a separate piece. I can pin it onto other outfits, so it's not actually sewn onto that one. Yeah, that flame motif, I probably would not ever do that again, and I still have to go back and couch cord over it to outline it better, and that's going to be a grudge match with patience sometime in the future. But I love the outfit. The fabric itself, the black and white fabric, was gifted to me by someone here in the Barony when she was decluttering her fabric stash, and I had to be really frugal with the cut because I think I only had like 5.5 yards, and I usually use about 7 to 8 when I'm making one of those. So it's not quite as full as I would normally make, but I still love the piece. And it's been subsequently morphed into a new outfit. Having worn it, I realized it didn't behave quite the way I wanted it to. So I cut apart another outfit that also didn't wear quite the way I wanted it to and merged the two of them together to make one sort of the Voltron dress of parts and pieces that came together to make a new whole. Yes, the good old Infanta dress. One of my fascinations has always been the weird extreme looks that don't make sense logically in any kind of a practical context. And I think, I mean, granted, this Infanta look is really on the screaming tail end of our timeline, depending on who you're talking to, because it's the 1630s, verging on 1640s. But given that so much of the fencing community pushes things well into Cavalier, I felt, what the hell, we're gonna have fun with this. I've been wanting to do that for a while. And I kind of think of this as living archaeology, in that none of these dresses ever survived intact. I would assume all of them got recut into something else, not as monumental later on. But they don't relate to any of the styles that were being worn immediately before them. And they disappear almost overnight, and there's no carryover in what followed immediately after them. So it doesn't make sense if you look at how fashion normally progresses, but at the same time, they had to choose that for a reason. She didn't just wake up one morning and decide, I want to wear the most inconvenient thing humanly imaginable and then torture my hair into a billboard that's wider than my shoulders for no good reason other than I can. There had to be a reason. And so I wanted to find out what it does to you when you wear one, but also how does it affect everyone around you? And if you look at the Infantas, let's just say they were not the prettiest girls to ever grace the earth. Inbreeding was the thing. The Habsburgs really needed to stop marrying first cousins together. And Infanta Maria, who wore the most extreme version of this, she was really also one of the most extreme versions of the females that demonstrated why you don't marry first cousins. But she got jumped into the gang at the age of 14 when her fiance died and her future father-in-law was a widow and he had no heir. So he needed a new wife who could produce heirs. And lo and behold, his son's fiance, who happens to be his first cousin and is 3 times younger than he is, she got married to him. And all of a sudden, instead of learning how to become a queen eventually, living at the Spanish court, she got jumped into the gang way early. As a not terribly pretty young woman from out of country, surrounded by Spanish beauties at court, I view that style as fake it till you make it, because the minute you put that thing on, it is strap on majesty and presence. Even if you don't feel amazingly beautiful, you are going to command presence walking into a room wearing that dining room table of a dress with the huge hair. And then you've got 6 or 7 other ladies in waiting who are also wearing the exact same thing. You're like a phalanx of battle. No one can get anywhere near you. They have to move back. They have to move out of the way. You command presence. And she only wore that look while she was young. Once she actually bore an heir and her husband died and she stepped up as regent, boom, that style disappeared. She started wearing much I mean, still very ostentatious, but much more pared down lines and much simpler frocks and much less complicated hair, because she was rolling up her sleeves and doing the work of ruling instead of having to be an ornament against a husband who's 3 times your age and your experience.
Wow.
And it made for an interesting gag at court. That would be, it's the heraldic dress, but as a nod to Christiana, who made me swear I would present it as such as often as possible, that is my cheap ass dress. It was made as a direct response to, there's an outfit that I also have in these photos of boy clothes that was completely hand sewn, 100% period accurate materials, but was stupid expensive to make in terms of the materials and what it would have cost in hours if I had assigned an hourly wage to it. And it bothered me that there's so much emphasis placed on people who can afford the time to do everything hand sewn and the money to invest in doing everything only out of period materials, when there are people who are doing really amazing work out of much humbler materials because that's what's in their means. And they're also using techniques that don't take up as much time because they've got kids, they've got a job, they've got a house to maintain. They don't have as much time to give up to this hobby that they love, but they still want something that looks fabulous. So I set myself a cap, $100. And I went over by $7.55 on that outfit. I allowed myself to raid my stash of leftover scraps from other projects for the linings in the bodice and the sleeves. So yeah, there is nice silk inside of it, but it's all stuff that was left over from other projects. I did not buy new. And the entire exterior is made from $3 a yard Walmart and Joann's cotton broadcloth that everyone makes their first starter tunics and poofy pants out of, because I wanted to show that you can make something fabulous and court presentable out of those humble fabrics, and using totally period appropriate embellishment techniques and construction techniques and patterning, even though you're not maybe able to throw hundreds, if not thousands of dollars at the miles of period appropriate fabric that it would have taken to do that if I was being super hardcore period everything about it.
Wow.
So it's got painted motifs, appliqued motifs, couched cord, you know, all techniques that were used in my period, the Elizabethan period, even though I'm implementing them on fabric. You know, they had cotton cloth in period. It was not the preferred fabric of use then, but I wanted to do something to demonstrate that, yeah, you can make something that's really visually arresting, but you don't have to break the bank to do it.
I love that.
Same.
Me and my uncle steer car, who has yet to successfully marry me off. Oh, well. Swear they're going to put a gold plaque on my cell here at the convent. That was me getting ready for doing the Between Two Peers interview last year in July with the Cleopatra dress behind me. And I'd been wanting to segue into wearing a gray wig for a while because, well, I'm gonna be turning 50 this year. So I was like, you know, I don't want to be that little old Italian lady who dyes her hair ink black until she's 99. It's very clear that, yeah, not the case. So I'm going to start working with gray as well as the black and the red.
And you make all of your own wigs and hair pieces.
Well, I buy the wigs, but I style them myself. And I, you know, that one is actually 2 wigs put together because that wig, the hair is too fine to get that monumental a style. And there's actually a bunch of really cheap, coarse falls braided into thick braids underneath the gray to create a sort of foundation to dress the hair over.
Wow.
And probably about 5 gallons of Aquanet because, you know, there's a whole stone layer with my name on it.
If I ever come up to you and sniff your wig, it's because I have a lot of nostalgia around Aquanet from the 80s. So I apologize in advance if I'm creepy.
Just don't.
I don't care if you sniff it, just don't light a match near it. Because it'll go up like conflagration real fast.
I made it weird, I'm sorry.
You did. Now I'm gonna think about sniffing wigs for
a new version of huffing that they never told you about.
Oh my God.
Sharpie markers are so last decade. We've moved on to wigs now. This would be the boy clothes outfit, and I'm wearing the outer black velvet jerkin tonight that I had made. Charles, my other co-Laurel parent with Inga, had challenged me to do an outfit front to back, top to bottom, period fabric, period technique. And so I'd done that one, and I used as the basis for the doublet and trunk hose underneath that black jerkin, the one outfit from Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion that is the young Medici son, his burial outfit, with a few course corrects, because I don't think Janet Arnold's interns took into account that a lot of the clothing that they were sketching and taking measurements from were burial clothes. And one of the things that I suspect, I can't prove it, but if you've ever tried to use the patterns exactly as they exist in the book, one of the things that you notice is that the shoulders slope the wrong way. Instead of sloping down from the neck to the shoulder, they slope down from the shoulder to the neck. And that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it really binds your arms. But if the doublet or the pair of bodies is made entirely and the shoulders aren't closed, and you wrap it around the dead body, it's much easier to get them in it. And then you close the shoulders after it's on them. It makes a little bit more sense, and it's easier to do the wrestling of dressing an uncooperative corpse if you go about it that way. And then you also have to figure they're laying in their coffin, and the shoulders, everything gets squished inward because they're not super wide. So it would naturally make the shoulders go up a little bit when they squish inward, which would account for why things were put together a little bit weirdly. Like I said, I can't prove it, but in looking at the pieces that all share that similar problem, they're all also pieces that were burial clothing instead of necessarily clothing that we can prove they wore running around in their everyday life. So I suspect that little foible was a byproduct of how they had to dress a corpse as opposed to how they were cutting clothing or how they were putting clothing together for a live bodied person.
Wow.
Wait, can I ask a question? What are the silver pieces on your doublet?
They are jewelry findings. I got them actually at Michael's. They're meant for making necklaces. I couldn't find a good version. There is a drawing, and it's an Austro-German rendering of an Italian noble wearing an outfit very similar to what I'm wearing in that. And the doublet, the jerkin that he's wearing is slashed down the front like mine is, and it's caught together with buttons or little jewelry moments. And these were the closest I could find that didn't upstage it too much, because I'd seen others that had actual gems in them and they're neat and they're flashy, but I was trying to, as much as I ever do, be a little bit more subtle with this one. So I dialed it down a little bit and didn't go for anything with gems. So they're very pretty, and as I look at them now, I actually see there are teeny tiny little white sort of rhinestone set in them, but they're so small. You have to be really, really super close to notice them. But I wanted them to be more about the cast metal design than about a bunch of gems on the thing.
It's beautiful, and I love finding things that work that aren't well, you found them at Michael's, right? So they probably weren't that expensive, and they look like Tudor roses. Anyway, very pretty.
That is from Penzic. We had a sort of witches' coven night of everyone who had any kind of liking for witchcraft and witches in the various periods of the SCA. And I'm wearing the one pair of bodies that I had made with the scarlet letter A pinned on the front. And the smock that I'm wearing underneath is actually a sheer silk that has gold embroidery on it that is the same pattern that the skull embroidery from Duchess Elizabeth's laurel elevation gown. I had a whole outfit that was made for steampunk, and the fabric for that smock was part of that outfit, and the steampunk community pretty much died on the vine here in Seattle. So I had a whole bunch of things that needed to get repurposed into something else rather than sit and take up closet space unnecessarily. And so that smock was one of the things that I made out of pieces from that outfit to sort of give it a new lease on life so it wasn't going to waste. Yes, trying to pawn me off in marriage to Haverick and Mary Grace's son.
It's beautiful though.
Yes.
Your car is really not the greatest of matchmakers. He has many talents. That is not one of them.
Were we talking earlier about like triple the age of something?
Yes.
Yeah, there was definitely that factor at play. That outfit there is the other half that I recut to go with the flame dress. It was fun, but it didn't end up fitting the way I wanted it to, didn't behave the way I wanted it to. And so rather than let it be something that hung out in my closet eternally and never got worn again, I decided, nope, you're going to the chop shop. We're going to make this into something that I will actually wear on future occasions. So it now has a new lease on life as a different frock. That's from one of the ANS competitions. That Sammy, our current ANS champion, her son, who is one of the neatest little human beings ever. Well, not little anymore, because that's a good 3-4 years ago. But now he is an amazing little conversationalist, but has always been fun to interact with. And he absolutely loved the skull necklace I was wearing that day, because it has an articulated jaw that he could make open and close. So he thought that was very fun.
That's one of my favorite things about wearing jewelry at SCA events is having kids just descend on it and play with it. It's really fun.
That is my Mother Goose outfit, as I have jokingly referred to it. I had made that pair of bodies and sleeves when I started experimenting with a later 1600s style of front lacing bodies that closed over a stomacher, because I tried to get more self-sufficient and not requiring a friend to get me into things because of back lacing. I mean, I can kind of Cirque du Soleil myself out of things if they're back laced, but it's hard to lace yourself into them. So I'm trying to do things that close up the front or lace up the front more now, so that I can do it all on my own. But I also made that little coif cap because I wanted an option that didn't require wearing a wig to be able to wear the coronet.
Oh, nice.
And that was en prix a number of years back.
Okay.
So many people had so much fun with that your car statue. I think I have a picture of me looking out between his legs.
I will neither confirm nor deny that I may have hung a pomander ball from the codpiece. Potentially. And we scurried out and got a bunch of votive candles at a local drugstore and snuck them in there and put them around on the base,
Nice.
along with a couple of flower offerings and some little crackers like bread offerings at St.
Nice.
Steer Park.
This is his armor stand, right? So this lives in his house.
Yes.
Yes, it lives in his house.
I'm pretty sure I would hit it at night if I came around the corner and it was standing there.
I think it lives in like an alcove.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, my understanding is it lives in a place where you're not likely to be caught unawares by it. You get to be prepped for exposure to it.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, I love it. I think it's amazing. And Ugo kept sending me photos as he was working on it. So I got to see the evolution process of the thing. That outfit was from the year Kiva and Ulf were on the throne, and they had opened up the crown tournament that was May Crown to same-sex pairs for the first time here in Ontier. And Alvar, who up to that point had been a fencer predominantly, asked to fight for me in Crown. So that was me standing on the sidelines cheering him on with the bodice with the embroidery for the Eleanor of Toledo fabric design.
You guys looked beautiful together at that crown. I think I got to fight him in like the second round or something. And you guys made such a beautiful pair.
It was really a fun day. I will swear that I was a little nervous because that was the first crown tournament after my friend Christos had passed away from cancer. And he had been geared up potentially to be fought for back in East Kingdom, and they were going to sort of make a test case for same-sex pairs out there. And I was like, Christos, so help me God, I will dig you up and kill you again if Alvar wins for me at a May Crown and I end up having to be Queen of Antir at Penzig. No. But he had great fun, and it was fun watching him because he went up against a bunch of people who had never gone up against a fencer before. So he had moves that surprised people. So he was able to beat a couple of rather seasoned fighters simply because he was pulling sneaky fencing maneuvers in that didn't dovetail as nicely with their heavy fighter brains.
And he has an amazing kit, like amazing.
Oh, beautiful kit. I loved his fighting kit.
I think there's a picture of it in here later.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
That's the one of the incarnations of the every woman dress. That bodice is one single piece. There are no seams other than where the shoulder straps come from the back and join the front. But it's basically just one piece, 3 layers thick with a couple of steel bones in it to make it hold its shape. And then the overskirt is just a giant rectangle cartridge pleated. Super, super simple. There's the first of the feather cloaks. That one was the Danger Peacock cloak that was made for Hansa down in California. That was for I can't remember which event it is that they have that's in October.
Great Western War.
Great Western War, yes. I wanted to say Antir West, but I'm like, no, I know that's summer. This is Great Western. Amusingly, when I first got approached to make the cape, I had thought it was going to be for Morgan. There was a slight misunderstanding of who was going to be the recipient because my co-laurel parent, Master Charles, he made the Muppet stole for Her Majesty. So the two of us were making them, but I thought it was going to be for Morgan and Lydia. And it wasn't until I was probably 2/3 of the way through that it got clarified that these were going to be gifts for their majesties of another kingdom. But it was fine because I had actually met Hansa many years before at Penzig. He's a doll, absolutely loved him. And I had loved watching Araya's reign as well. So I was like, nope, no worries. I'm still in it. I want to make this. So I had a hell of a lot of fun making that. And if memory serves, that cloak can be measured in the entire run of the series of Peaky Blinders on Netflix, because that's what I was watching as I was putting that thing together.
I love, I have the same kind of sewing memories. I'll be like, yes, I put that together watching True Blood for the 3rd time. The cloak is amazing. It is so beautiful. And you know that because he's such a peacock, is going to wear the hell out of it. It is just so beautiful. I love the gradations of the greens and blues.
Should I go back?
No, it's okay. I had to say something because I love it.
Her Majesty sent me some silk. Olivia had sent me some silk to use. I got a few chunks of silk and she sent me a few as well, to blend them together to create the peacock colors. And I reassured him, because I told him I'm going to do 2 new versions, because Morgan had jokingly said several times as I was sending him progress reports in the construction that he was going to have a hard time giving it away. And both Morgan and Livia had said they were going to have to sock away their pennies and eventually have me make them set. And I was like, oh, noted. And so thus the plan evolved to make them their set of the Phoenix cloaks for their step down. But I made sure I cleared it with Hanzo that it was going to be a different design, similar but different, so that his was still going to be a unique piece. But if the three of them ever showed up together, they would be recognizable as similar. That would be good old Cleopatra. And that will be for Uta, who has previously worn the crown with Sir Ajax down in the mists. And he's going to be my Mark Antony, which is going to be real fun, all in purple. But I had a hell of a lot of fun designing and making that Cleopatra dress. And for all that it looks really, really complicated, I actually pared back. There was supposed to be a second layer of those basket woven sort of swooping swags. And it just, you lost the snake motif if I did that. So I was like, nope, we're going to actually pull the Coco Chanel bit and take one thing off here because it doesn't need that.
That's
But
amazing on her.
Talk a little bit about your project and what these are for and where the genesis of it was. And yeah.
I absolutely can. So our camp, the Pleasure Pavilions at Penzic, we host a big blow the barn doors off party every year at Penzic at the end of first week, right before War Week begins. And it's usually very much a sort of who's who VIP style party. In the past, we did one that was themed around Bosch's painting The Garden of Earthly Delights. The one after that was themed after Botticelli's Birth of Venus painting. And those were very theatrical presentations. There was a stage, there were different acts presented. And we served food and refreshment, but it was very much a theatrical thing. We didn't want to get locked into having to do ever increasingly complicated theater style productions with a stage. And so the last Penzic that we had in person, a friend and I in my camp, we noticed that a recurring conversation that happened in all of our friend groups for whatever reason that year was how much everyone loved the movie Clue. And also the game, but in particular the movie, and how slapstick funny it was. And so when we thought about creating an oh my God over the top party, we were like, how do we make Clue relevant in an SCA sense, since clearly there's a bunch of people who love the concept of the game and the mechanics of it. How do we make that work? And the original idea was to assign historical personages to the different character roles, Miss Scarlet, Professor Plum, what have you. The problem was when we did that, everyone kept getting caught up in the, well, why would they all be together? They lived in different times or different countries. And we're like, okay, that requires too much thinking and suspension of disbelief. But the thing that I have always loved are alternate views of Shakespeare, where like Shakespeare in Love, where you get to see nuggets of a bunch of different plays in terms of lines or scene scenarios play out such that you kind of see how Shakespeare might have come up with the ideas for some of the plays, or plays like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, or my particular favorite, Desdemona, The Affair of the Handkerchief, where you're seeing characters from a Shakespeare play that we all know, but what happens in the downtime when they're not on stage? What are they doing in all of that time? They're off, not in front of the audience. And very quickly we thought, what happens if we make all of these Clue characters people from Shakespeare plays and run with the idea that they're sort of a big dysfunctional family. They don't particularly get along real well. Shakespeare is dad, and they're all competing for being dad's favorite. And the reason they're all there is dad is about to premiere a new play, which means they're about to get more competition. What happens then? And it very quickly fell into place, and we were like, oh, we quickly homed in on which characters would be fun to put in a group together and see what would happen. And we pointedly made sure that as far as all of the performing characters, they are people who either killed someone or conspired to kill someone in their own play. So you can't immediately look at it and say, oh, well, there's a fellow, it's got to be him. He's the murderer because he killed. Nope, they've all had their hand in some amount of death, even if it was their own. So you can't immediately make that assumption. And once we came up with that idea, it was designing each of the characters in monochromatic color scheme, pretty much. I'm allowing a little bit of crossover in, Cleopatra has teeny tiny accents of purple on her if you get up really close. And Mark Antony will have teeny tiny accents of gold on him when you get up really close. But for the most part, they are going to be very monochromatic. They are all utilizing some amount of basic cotton broadcloth that you get at Joann's. One, because it keeps the cost down, and I'm doing 13, 14 of these, but also because I needed to find a fabric that I could get in a range of colors where the color saturation level was uniform across all of the options, because I wanted them to feel like game pieces, very saturated, heavy duty color, partially because this is going to be at night under flickering torchlight and candlelight, which numbs color a lot. So these are way more intense than I would have done if this were a stage play that was happening under stage lights, or it was something that was going to be happening in daylight. I was very much sort of calibrating for the dulling factor that nighttime and torchlight was going to have to maintain color intensity in the final product. But we are not scripting their parts. It's going to be very improv. So I picked a bunch of people, it's Ajax and Uta, Sarah Lorraine from Frock Flicks, and her boyfriend Kelly are going to be Romeo and Juliet. And I've got Duchess Cassandra from Caid is going to be my Tamra. People who have either sat on a throne and thus are used to performing in a court sense, or people who have been involved in Ren Fair, so they're used to inhabiting a character but in an improv way, as opposed to having necessarily scripted beats and lines. And we're basically going to give all of them a short character description of, here's who you like, here's who you don't, go have fun and play. And the party, we are treating it like it's the first third of any murder mystery movie, where you're getting to know all of the characters and figure out who likes who hates who wants who dead. And the murder happens at the end of the party. And we're going to film a couple of little skits to post on Facebook so that everyone who's a guest at the party can go after the party and look at sort of a couple of different possible endings, like the movie Clue had, where they was like, well, here's what might have happened, and they run through scenario A, and then here's another way it might have happened, scenario B, and then you get but here's what really happened. So we wanted to have that as a way of making an interactive piece that they could have after the party online, but also we're going to have a lot of people at the party taking photos so that people don't have to document their experience, but they're going to go to a private Facebook group where they can approve whether it goes out there publicly later on, but they're all there, and the whole party and what everyone wears to it is documented, and they can share that memory with people without having to be trying to enjoy the party and preserve the moment for posterity at the same time.
Wow.
It's such a big idea and such a big project and so much creativity. So I have to ask, have you converted one of the bedrooms in your abode into a closet?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, there, he must have the biggest closet ever. So
it is not finished by any means, and if I could easily turn the camera to the side, you would see right next to my desk is a double-sided rolling rack that I had spent the last couple of days sorting through all of the fabric that I've got for the various characters and putting them in order, and I'm starting to make tags for them so I know how much yardage I have, because I'm gonna bang out probably 2, maybe 3 of them to show at Athenaeum. But I'm trying to ascertain what I still need to get to be able to realize the vision that I've got. But yeah, it's a small theatrical production effectively in terms of the number of costumes, but we're going to approach it as a full sensory experience. Each character is going to have a space dedicated to them, and we're going to decorate it in their color, and we're going to have food and beverage that either reference where the character's from or are color themed. To some extent, we're trying to be somewhat period in our choices, but we're not going to hold ourselves to being 100% absolutely period in all of the food and beverage choices, but we're trying to get close to an experience, but aromas, foods, beverages, so that it is a full sensory experience that you walk into when you're in that party.
wow.
I'm just blown away by all of this. Wow.
Yeah, that was the nightmare pattern to mirror and match and be able to maximize the usage of that yardage.
For Christos.
Yes. There's a closer view of the laurel dress, the embroidery on it for Duchess Elizabeth, with the skull motif in it.
And I think we already saw that picture. There we go.
There we go. At the presentation at that May Crown with Alvar. I love that fighting kit of his. And he also had an amazing Spanish helmet that he got as well. It is just gorgeous. And it was brand spanking new at that event. So it gleamed in that May sunlight.
Yeah, it was a sight to see. It really was.
You were both just beautiful.
Made a huge impression on me.
That was, I believe, Christian and Helene's step down. That was the one where they had the shtick of Christian getting progressively younger throughout the court. And I was supposed to be the aged hag who was warning them that there was a curse on that finger reliquary that he was gifted. But babies are just way too much fun at events. I cannot resist walking up and interacting with them because they are just the greatest thing ever. That is one of the other outfits that I had made for Christos. And Lord love it, his mother, sweet little Sicilian woman. I'm sorry, oh God. She'd cut my tongue out for that. Cypriot, very different. She was unused to helping him get ready in that later Venetian style, he was used to doing an earlier, more high-waisted look. So she didn't know how to do the ladder lacing across the front, which is why it zigzags back and forth on that one, as opposed to doing the parallel ladder lace lines. But he had sent me a pattern for a pair of effigy bodies that he had made for himself that I used as the base for that orange and gold pair of bodies underneath. And then he had sent me the fabric, and I put that all together for him and made the standing ruff as well.
Stunning.
It's so striking.
Christos definitely knew how to wear a frock. That is the every woman dress in its maiden voyage at 12th Night in Ocean Shores a number of years ago. It was bitter cold that year.
Yeah.
But I love that frock. That was so much, that was a fun one, and it got a lot of mileage before I ultimately ended up having to cut it up and make it into something else, because I inadvertently washed it with, of all things, that red ruff.
Oh,
And
Oh,
for years, the red still bled and turned the whole dress a variable shade of pink. I believe on the left there, Duchess Elizabeth is putting a court baronetcy coronet on the conspirator who I sent that piece of calligraphy to, who was their head of retinue, Chamberlain, and she's also the one who's sort of wrangling cats, goats, and all other animals for the joint pelican elevation that they will eventually be having once we can have in-person events again.
Wow.
Probably the most somber and understated outfit that I've got. That was the Baronial Arts and Sciences event where I won champion, presenting the Infanta dress, before then, you know, a year later, stepping down and becoming Arts and Sciences Minister. The trunk hose have since been deconstructed because they weighed 8,000 pounds of drapery weight velvet, and the doublet has gone, it has been gifted to someone else. So I don't have any of that in its original form anymore. They've all gone on new lives.
A doublet is just lovely.
Alvar had asked for a cardinal's coat to go with his kit, so I had made him the red coat. I unfortunately vastly underestimated the amount of yardage it would take to make something as voluminous as was pictured there, but it still looked really great on him, and he wore the ever-loving daylights out of it. I loved the way it worked with his existing kit.
very cool.
Ah, yes, there it is. That first 12th night in Bellingham. My first on-tier event in that Frankenstein frock. That is Baroness, and I'm going to I'm drawing a blank on it. Kim Austin, on Facebook on my friends list. She's from out in East Kingdom, also a friend of Christos. I'm completely drawing a blank right now on her SCA name, but Christos made the outfit that she's wearing. And she had come out here to visit. She was seeing someone who was out here on tier. So she came to visit, and we went to that 12th night in Bellingham. And yeah, that outfit was hotter than the hinges of hell to wear. I will never make one out of those materials ever again. But it was amusing. That
looks a little like Angus.
I believe, yes, that is Angus.
Who just turned 7.
Yeah, thank you. I needed that reminder of how imminent my decrepitude is approaching. I'll be turning 50 in November.
I'm 52, so I'm allowed.
That was at a 12th night with Angus, who was very fascinated with what I was wearing before I was holding him, and then very much didn't like the up close and quickly turned into a shrieking child.
Oh, poor dude.
Which, you know, I can't blame him. There's another view of the Laureline gown.
Wow.
That was the first thing that I had made for Bergdise. She had a huge quantity of that dark blue quilted cotton, and it wasn't particularly period, so I was trying to find a way of dressing it up to be more period appropriate. And so I had a length of that rainbow brocade that it cycled through 4 different iterations of that same pattern with different color contrasts. And so I used that and then pearl embellished the ever-loving daylights out of it. But
Wow.
That was a fun one too.
I think is she wearing the baronial circlet for?
Yes, she is.
I made that. I haven't seen that on anyone but Tim and Tirza, but that's really cool that they wore those two. I didn't know anyone else wore them. Makes me happy. And
we're back.
The boomerang has gone full circle.
Wow, I am just blown away by the thoughtfulness behind your work and the extent to which you have stories behind everything that you make.
They usually evolve out of a story first. The only one I would say that wasn't really the case was the heraldic one, and that I came up with the visual for that first simply because I wanted a heraldic outfit. I was jealous of all of the people who got to have fun sort of 13 and 14, the high Gothic look where party colored outfits were much more of a thing. They'd really gone out of vogue by the time, late period rolled around. So I was like, I felt jealous. I'm like, screw it. The middle letter in our group is C for creative. I'm making a heraldic outfit, even though they really didn't intend to do it, just because I can. And so the visual for that one came first, and then it morphed into the price challenge and the fabric challenge as a way of putting it into a better, more SCA relatable context, in terms of having a conversation about the why and the wherefore, other than just, I want it. Which, totally a valid justification. I want to look like a pretty princess. Totally cool. I want to look like a knight. Go for it. But I try and have at least a little bit more meat behind it, especially if I'm going to do something as wacky and outlandish as that one ended up being, underpinning it so that there is more of a conversation to have about it than just seemed like a neat idea at the time.
And I'm super fly.
I think super crazy is probably a little bit more accurate if we're aiming at a target, but we'll go with super fly. It sounds better.
I like that descriptor. So is that what inspires you when you do your art? Is the storytelling? Is that what really kind of gets you going, or is it a love for who you're sewing for, or what really gets you inspired?
That, I think it's both of those, really. I don't tend to do paid commissions that much because I don't like having a price tag attached to it and a contract and a calendar. For as much as I impose a calendar myself, I also give myself permission to walk away from something when it's driving me buggy or I'm about to throw it through a window in frustration and go do something else. And if it's a commission piece where you've signed, you've got a contract and agreement and blah, 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 you can't really do that. You have to, nose to the grindstone it. But I also have people that I like sewing for because I know them, I know how they like to wear clothes, so I know how to cut things for them and make things for them that they will wear rather than it wearing them. And thus they'll actually give it a life and give it a story of its own once they start interjecting it into events. But there will usually be, if it's not something I'm making for myself, there will usually be some amount of conversation with the person who's going to be wearing it about what their intent is and asking them where their comfort zone is on whether it's fabrication or brightness of color or amount of contrast or pattern or texture. I unabashedly like the structure and the weirdness that creates a shape. So I don't shy away from doing something that requires a pair of bodies laced on underneath and an inconveniencing farthingale that makes you look like you're a torso sticking out of a dining room table. And not everyone's going to love that, and not everyone wants that experience. So I like having those conversations up front so that I don't begin thinking about what I'm going to make for them in a way that would hamper them from being themselves while they're in it. But other than that, I'll go through the drawing part is my picking it apart and thinking about how I want to construct it, because if I'm drawing it out, and often in addition to the sort of full figure costume design that I post a lot of, there's also the sort of flat pattern pieces designs like that Turkish one where I'm actually thinking about where the design elements of the pattern of the fabric are going to fall, and what does it look like when you flatten this thing out into a bunch of pieces on a tabletop, so that I've thought through at least 2 or 3 different ways of how that goes together before I've decided, okay, that's the one I'm going to go with. I think that one's the smartest use of fabric or time or my willingness to commit to level of frustration. You do have to
totally a factor.
The frustration factor is definitely there. And there are people that I will absolutely, the stuff I'm making for Liz and Zig, that's labor of love stuff, their family. So I'm investing a lot more details in the things that I'm making for them than I might for myself, because I'm making it very specific to each of them.
That makes sense. Is there anything that we haven't talked about tonight that you wanted to cover?
Ultimately, I think we've covered a good bit of turf.
I think so too. You've been quite busy during the pandemic with your project and with running Athenaeum. How do you see your re-entry or your restart of the SCA going?
Well, amusingly, I'm going to be fought for in the next, whenever it happens, crown tournament, by someone that I think does actually stand a statistically reasonable chance. So there is that thought looming in the background. But I'm kind of right now assuming that it's going to be likely 12th night.
Yeah.
That's the first possible event, whole kingdom together, that we'll be able to have. Hopefully, knock wood, everyone get your vaccine, everyone be responsible until then. Let's not be stupid and have another resurgence. But all things being equal, 12th night, and we're hosting it here in Madrona. And so I'm kind of planning as a goal right now to have these Shakespeare characters done by that point. And we're talking with a bunch of the people who are going to be inhabiting those roles about coming to that 12th night. So we can sort of have a dry run, try them on, see how they fit, make notes about, hey, can we tweak this? Can we do that? But also have sort of a dry run of the party and maybe test a few of the recipes for some of the things that we want to serve at the real party. And also just teaser to get people to come to Penzic and experience the real thing and have a party with our friends at 12th night. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one. As far as re-entry, I would love to hope that things go wonderfully and we get to have gatherings sooner, but I think realistically and responsibly, placing the hopes and expectations at 12th night as the real first possible event is kind of not setting myself up for a huge amount of emotional letdown if it can't happen. And they are making contingency plans if it has to be another ethereal event as opposed to an in-person. But we're going with the hope
that it's going to be in person.
Which means it will also likely be a crown tournament as well as a 12th night, all in one event. Oh my God.
So much fun.
And would be really interesting because what would we fight crown in a ballroom? I don't think we've ever done that.
I know some of the people who are on the planning committee for it. I do not know about the content of the discussions that they are having for how it would be addressed. My guess, if I were the one making the plan, would be that it will truly be a 3-day event, in that Friday will be a full day of the event and the crown tournament will happen on Friday. And they'll go ahead with a normal 12th night court on Saturday, where you've got the step down and step up. So whoever wins that crown tournament on Friday, you're getting jumped into the gang the next day.
So make your step up clothing now. Seriously, I think people should be prepared. If they're going to fight in that crown, prepare yourselves.
Definitely. And how much, when are you ever going to have 8 months to sew and have your weekends and whatever? But I want to go back to crown and someone fighting for you, because you put that out into the Facebook universe.
Yep, I did.
I was like, I really hope this happens for you, because you were so passionate about it. And I am just so happy that you put it out into the universe and the universe said yes. So,
and oddly enough, it was the person who was at the top of my wish list of who I'd want to be standing next to if it happened, who reached out and said, "You cool with this?" And I was like, absolutely.
Very cool.
Hands down. I do, and this is where it gets into dicey territory conversationally, but if I'm honest, I feel like there are a lot of important conversations within the SCA about how we're going to move forward. And it doesn't feel like On Tier has as much of a voice at the table in those conversations as I would hope. I know there are amazing people behind the scenes doing a lot of really wonderful work. However, my gut reaction is still, we're leaving a lot on the table because we're not being as present and as vocal as other kingdoms are in how they're engaging with their populace and how they are continuing to develop connectivity throughout COVID, both with other kingdoms, but also with their populace. And I think this whole COVID thing has brought into high relief the fact that we need to be thinking about who our role models and our leaders are going to be, not just based on fighting prowess, which is certainly a concern, but how they, as individuals, engage with the broader world. And you can't discount online anymore. If all of the grease fire problems that we've had with scandals erupting during COVID over trims and hate speech and problems have not borne out the fact that we can't ignore that the internet exists anymore. We have to factor it into how we, as an SCA, recruit and present ourselves to the world. And we can't ever not be conscious that someone is watching at any, particularly at a kingdom level event.
Yeah.
At a May crown, possibly, if we're off at a field or somewhere where the public isn't quite as accessible, but people are still photographing, they're filming. And once it goes out there, we lose the ability to contextualize what it is. People are going to see it and they're going to interpret it however they're going to. But particularly at a 12th night, we're in a hotel with a whole bunch of non-SCA people also there, and they're all armed with a cell phone, and they can take photos and they can take video, and some of them have Instagram accounts and some of them have TikTok, and they may not interpret what we're doing favorably. And it is to our detriment if we don't at least consider to some degree how we are presenting ourselves in those instances. And are we putting the best public face forward if we truly want new blood to come into this hobby and we want to embrace diversity and communities that otherwise have not really had much of a presence within the SCA?
100% agreed
100%.
with everything you said. and I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what the path is to make that happen. But I'm willing to do the work. I just don't know how to make it. I don't know how to make it work. But I think that having these conversations is really, really important.
I think a lot of it comes down to a huge number of people grabbing hold and lifting the load. I don't think there's going to be a singular silver bullet solution that, oh, we do this one thing or we stop doing this one thing and everything magically becomes better and all of our problems evaporate and recruitment goes through the roof.
Right.
There's going to have to be a lot of incremental shifts. You know, it's like steering an aircraft carrier. You don't turn it on a dime. It's going to be a slow step-by-step process as we identify the problem areas, the broken stairs, the bad voices, but also the good voices, and who are the new voices that we need to bring in, and who are the voices that maybe haven't had as big a megaphone as they deserve or as tall a podium to shout from as they deserve. It's going to be all of those things and more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Before we retool, but we are at that point where we have to recognize the SCA can't just be what it's always been. It has to now grow into its next iteration because society has moved on fundamentally in so many ways from what it was when the SCA was a bunch of guys in the back of someone's yard in pickle barrel armor and carpet armor, swatting each other with sticks. And the longer we try and blindly hold on to as many of those old things that aren't necessarily serving us well in the present or in the future, the more problems we're going to have.
I agree.
I think it's really important too that the people that are most affected by the conversation are participants. I've been really sort of invested lately in DEI and in the fighting culture. And it's just so important that, you know, I know people want to make changes and they just don't know how. And the first thing you need to do is ask the question and show the people that feel disenfranchised that their voices matter and that what they want matters and that you're willing to listen. I just think that's so important. I think sometimes people want to fix things and they don't realize that we're not asking, no one's asking the disenfranchised people to fix things, but you got to hear their voice. You got to hear what they're saying, what they see the problems are, what the microaggressions are that you can't see yourself. Anyway, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but
no, I don't think that's a tangent at all. I think that's a very important point, and listening is going to be, I think, a huge component of how any of these changes happen, because too often what I notice happening is people trying to not be part of the problem by saying, I didn't do that, I don't do that, I am not like that. And thus they're sort of negating that it happens when the person who actually experiences those things expresses it. And it's wonderful that you are not someone who does that. You are not someone who says that or feels that or thinks that. But at the same time, it's important that you listen to the person who is and don't invalidate the truth of their experience by trying to say, well, I don't see it happening. I don't do it. It's never happened around me. Well, okay, good. That's wonderful. That's a bubble we may not need to worry about, but there are others.
Well, and not only, like, I think people need to realize you might not think it's going on around you, but you're coming from an experience. Like I had a Duke say that he never saw women not be included in whatever. I'm like, well, of course you didn't. You're a white man. You know, you didn't have the same experience as any of these women. So of course you didn't see it, right? Like, but that doesn't mean it's not there. So you got to listen and be like, oh, well, maybe my perspective of the world is not their perspective, right? Like, and it's not that you're wrong, and it's not that being a man is wrong. It always bugs me when people get all upset about the phrase toxic masculinity, because it's not masculinity. That's the word that is bad in that term. It's toxic. Toxic. So yeah.
You're looking at the wrong part of that phrase,
Right.
really. One of the things, when we were having the conversations back and forth, when we first talked about him fighting for me, and I'm purposely not going to put him on the spot.
That's fine. Yeah.
By naming him, because one, I'm enjoying the conversations we get to have in the, well, what do you think about this, and what do you think about this phase, without anyone else imposing in on them yet.
100%.
But he kept pressing me to identify how he should refer to me. And I wasn't immediately getting it, because he's very much wanting to be respectful of me. I'm like, I trust you. I know you, you know me. You're not going to be an oaf. This is fine. But what it finally came down to was, what he was asking is, do I intend to be the queen if he wins for me? And at that point, I'm like, yes, because one of the conversations that I have seen happen repeatedly from a number of quarters are people who complain about pronoun use and gender identification. And it just chaps my ass something fierce when they whine about that, when we're in a hobby where we're already all using pretend names anyhow, that we weren't born with. So they're very clearly already capable of using a name other than your given or your own. So I told him flat out, when I've got that crown on, I'm going to be in full lady attire. And don't think for a moment I won't make the point a few times that, you know, when I walked into this event, I was dressed just like Baron Aeron Corrino. And you addressed me accordingly. And yet when I put on this frock and I put on this crown, you addressed me as Your Majesty, the Queen. Clearly, you're capable of discerning there is a switch happening there and it's of my choosing, so it can't be that difficult. So if you can do it for me, you can do it for any member of the populace who says, this is who I am and how I would like to be addressed. End of story.
Yep. It shouldn't even be an issue.
No, but
It shouldn't even be an issue.
It is definitely an object lesson that I will take several opportunities of making if the opportunity arises. Who knows? Might be pie in the sky wishing, but you know, if he wins for me, that is definitely a conversation that will happen, because I fully own I was bad about it early on. People would ask me how I wanted to be addressed. And ultimately, as long as they were being respectful, I really never cared, because I don't identify as trans in everyday life. I created a persona that skirts the gender line, but there's a story behind it, but it's only within the SCA. So it never registered as an important conversation for me in an SCA context. Where it really came home, though, was when I was wearing that boy clothes outfit that you saw earlier, the red one that I had made fully by hand. I got a whole lot of attention from people, older peers, who would come over to me, and I'm sure they were meaning well when they were saying this, but there were the number of times someone came over and said, "You look so handsome in that. I think you look so much handsomer in boy clothes." And it clicked as something wrong when I heard it, but my brain was focusing on the compliment and not the full context of what was being said, until one instance where I happened to notice that we were at an event where there were a lot of new people and a whole group of whom were trans, and they were within earshot of that interaction. I don't know if they heard what was said, but in my mind, I had to assume they were. And this was the first event I'd seen them at. So this could possibly have been their first SCA event. And they're hearing someone say, "I like you as long as you stay in your lane where I'm comfortable with you, not how you may feel comfortable with yourself." And I'm like, okay, that's not a message we can allow to continue forward. So that I went out of my way from that point forward to make sure pronoun usage was articulated. Even if I was shifting based on what I was wearing, I was having the conversation that pronouns were important, and that it was important that people use the correct ones, so that we got other people in the habit of doing that as a natural course of their SCA interactions.
And it's not only people new to the SCA. We have a whole generation of children of long-term SCA players that are not gender conforming. They're discovering who they are, and they need to be supported at events around that. And if we can't offer that to our own families, that's a problem. How are we going to be able to reach out to new people? We're not. We have to step up. We have to be better.
Absolutely. Because if we don't keep our children invested in the process, we're not going. This game can only keep going if we bring new people to the table, but also our children and our family members stay invested in the process. They're our gold.
For sure. For sure. Well, I think that that's a really huge amount of work that you're taking on. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And I will support you in any way that I can. So there.
I'm all grommet hands.
Thank you for taking us down that path. I really appreciate having
Me
that.
too. I really appreciate it as well.
I've been enjoying watching the conversations that you guys have been having in these interviews, but also just your own personal page conversations on gender awareness, and particularly women in the fighter community as well, because that is very much, I think, an arena that needs to be made more visible, but also demystified, because there are so many misconceptions surrounding it. And I'm like, there are so many conversations that need to be happening about how to develop and foster that as well. And I'm like, yep, these are definitely conversations that I have bookmarked to follow. You know, where are they going and how are they evolving?
And I think it's really important to take this time that we have and do something with it, and use it to talk about these things and to normalize some of the conversations that make people uncomfortable or just awkward because it's not how they were brought up.
Yeah.
You know, why aren't we using this time? I think we should use it better.
And I you know, this interview program, the Ask a Knights program, the Between Two Peers, the branch of Laurels, I'm really enjoying the types of conversations that are coming out of them, because they're keeping a lot of these issues on the table and not letting them flounder because we're not able to come together at events and have these conversations over a table and over drinks in person. You know, it's not optimal having to do it via Zoom, you know, not everyone's preference, but we're still having them, and it's important that we have them. And I think I love that they're being archived as well, so that, you know, they don't disappear into memory. You know, so many of these are committed to YouTube channels and people's Facebook pages, so that we can go back and review them, and we can go back and see the reminders of, oh yeah, I was thinking we needed to do this and do that, and we were talking about this and that at certain points. So the archiving factor is really amazing with all of this, I think.
Yeah, and I think just making it really approachable, I guess, is that the right word? I think that is the right word.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe that a majority of people want to do the right thing, and they want to help steer the SCA in a direction that is going to be more welcoming and more inclusive, but that they really just have a hard time getting out of their own perspective and need the tools to know what to do. And you know what? I'm happy to write a list, you know, or whatever. You know, I really do believe that most people are open to it, that we just need to educate.
Yeah. And I think as we educate and as we share our personal experiences rather than letting people make assumptions, that's going to be such a huge component of putting those truths on the table, so that, like puzzle pieces, they can all be fitted together and you see what the whole picture is eventually. You know, I think in some ways we've defined what the edge is, and we're starting to work inward, filling in pieces. But as more people speak up and talk about what they're experiencing and how they're understanding things, we're filling in more of the center, and we're going to get there.
And we one of the things that we have realized with these interviews is that we have focused a lot on peers and long-term players, because you know, we started out wanting to kind of allow people to know who had shaped the kingdom in the past. And we are, and you're the first non-peer that we've interviewed. Thank you very much for braving that. But I think that we are both kind of wanting to turn and be more inclusive ourselves and start hearing those other voices and start diving more into that middle.
That's what I was going to say. Nobody has all the answers. I am educating myself as I go. You know, and as we know better, we do better. And that's true for everyone. And I think we have to be gentle and my brain is like in a fog. Like
patient with each other.
Patient with ourselves and each other, and allow ourselves the grace to do better and not, you know, beat ourselves up about, you know, maybe other things. That's what I think.
I actually didn't realize that I'm the first non-legit peer that you guys have interviewed. So thank you for that. I tend to view, I inhabit a sort of weird space within the SCA because having worn the big elaborate frocks and having the tall coronet on more than one occasion, people have made assumptions about me being one version or another of peer. And I'm like, oh, no, that's above my pay grade. That one over there, that's who you're, you don't have to drop a curtsy for me. No. But at the same time, when I got the baronial coronet, I didn't know what to do with it because the actual real peerages have a definition, they have a job, they have a role to fill in terms of how they are then paying forward, developing the new talent in their particular area of expertise. You get a court baronetcy thrown at you, there's nothing. It's like, okay, what do I do with this thing? Do I have a job? Is this just a piece of jewelry as a thank you? Is this the, okay, you're never going to get another award, but we have to give you something. So it's that, you know, what do you do with it? I know, but
it's one of my pet peeves. It makes me just.
And it's one of the first things that I had heard about what they were when I was trying to figure out, what do you do with this thing now that you've got it? Because it does not have as defined a role. And I've just kind of decided that between it and the fact that I got a big mouth and I happen to have a lot of good friends who are well-placed peers across a number of kingdoms, and I go to a lot of inter-kingdom events, I have the advantage of being able to say things that someone else with a lower profile, let's say publicly, might not feel comfortable saying because they don't have the megaphone, or because they're newer, or because they're less experienced. I'm like, you know what? If wearing this thing is a coating of Teflon that lets me say the things that other people need to be saying, but don't necessarily feel the franchise to do it, cool, okay. That's what I'll take this and run with and do with it until I've worn a hole in it and people say, shut the hell up.
Well, and that's what's so weird about peerages and power in the SCA is it's all perception. It's all perception, and you can be a peer and not wear any of that stuff and just be so subtle that nobody perceives you as having that power and that presence, and you can be you and carry that so well and so honorably and use your power for good, you know. So it's just a really weird thing that we do in the SCA.
To pivot to a sort of amusing story so that we can sort of move toward a fun note, but also referencing power, peerage, and perception. A former Queen of Antir, I won't name her, but she's been queen elsewhere too. So if you're, Velma or Scooby, you might be able to figure this one out. Was at Penzic, and as I said, our camp has a big party every Saturday night of first week, and this was a particularly hot Penzic, where the humidity and the heat did not go down after the sun dropped. And I'm in fully rigged Elizabethan, and Christos is in fully rigged Elizabethan, and we are sweating our makeup off. And we have the big folding gunshot fans. And we're constantly flicking them and fanning ourselves. And this queen and her king show up to the VIP section, and they're more than a little bit in their cups. And their retinue are also very much in their cups. So there's no one driving the bus sober.
That's
and
super good.
They're wearing their kingdom crowns, which they're hard to miss. You could see them from high orbit. It kind of looks like someone took a cathedral and dipped it in gold leaf, flying buttresses and all. So there's no missing them. And they kept pointing out to us, excuse me, that they were the royals from their kingdom. And we don't play favorites with royals in our camp because we're all from different kingdoms. We'd never stop bowing and scraping if we did that. But she didn't like the sound of the gunshot fans every time we were flicking them. They kept startling her. And we were up on stage emceeing the program, and she was far enough in her cups that she did not hesitate to stand up in her seat mid-show and heckle us from the audience to try and get us to stop flicking the fans. And to underscore her point, she pointed to the crown on her head and said, "I'm the queen, you have to listen to me." And that was about the point where I had the shits of it. Pardon my French. And without thinking, and fast as a gunshot, I fired back, "Sit down. You're a queen for 6 months. I was born one, and I'll be carried out of this life in a pine box a queen. I trump you." Fortunately, her king and one of the retinue grabbed her by the girdle belt, hauled her butt back down into his, and stuffed a cocktail in her hand, and we were able to finish the show. But yes, peerage and presence and perception are all a matter of vantage point within the SCA, and they shift no matter where you are standing.
It's true.
Very true.
And you can fall at any time. So just remember that.
My tongue once or twice. Don't think I haven't.
Well, we all have. That's my point.
Yeah.
We all of our little fortresses fall down. Did you lose something?
I was looking for my calendar, and I'm not really sure where it is, because I was thinking, no, who are we interviewing next week? I don't know.
Would you like me to share who we're interviewing?
I would love for you to share that.
Okay. So this Saturday, Rifkin and I and Duchess Dagmar are going to be on the Hound and Stags How shit
it not shit.
Well, but there's those little symbols, how it
Okay.
works. But
All
I think it's supposed to be how shit works, but they're being,
All right.
but that's 8 a.m. Saturday.
Yeah, I don't expect any of you guys to be up with us.
But that's a really cool show they're doing, where they're taking every office, every peerage, every position in their kingdom, and they're doing a show on how it works. I think it's a really great idea. So, and then Sunday at 11 a.m., I'm interviewing Magistra Arya Mala. Probably butchered that name. I don't have my glasses on. I'm sorry. For Branch of Laurels. And then Monday, Dagmar and I are interviewing Adina from the West. I think she's a countess. She might be a duchess, but I think it's countess, for Grace Under Pressure. And then Tuesday on Branch of Laurels is Pasha. And then Wednesday we have Isolt of, and I'm not going to say the last name because I can't say it, but she's from the Summits. She was an English teacher who has brought in just a ton of people into the SCA down in the Summits. And she's an amazing, amazing person.
Cool.
And I think that's it for the week.
Well, actually, on Sunday, I am leveling up on demystifying being royalty and how it is okay to want to win crown and be queen, and that it is okay to prepare for it. And I'm going to have a panel of fabulous people. I have Duke Dog from the middle, Duchess Dalla from Montier, Countess Ariana from Montier, Viscountess Sealy from the west, Duchess Antigone from Astiora, and I think Duchess, and I'm going to totally kill her name, Kiva or Calfwin from the east. So it should be very interesting, lots of different inner kingdom anthropology.
Wow.
Yeah, and all of you people in Ontario that might be getting ready for a 12th night crown, what would you call that, a 12th crown or
Coronation?
I don't know, crownation, a crownation. Tune in and learn how to best prepare, and 8 months to sew. So anyway.
I think we'll have to call that a conflagration.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us too. I'm sorry we went a little long tonight, but I think the conversation at the end was important and
worth it.
And worth it. So
yeah, thank you so much, Your Excellency, for everything.
Thank you guys. This has been an absolute joy. I really had a lot of fun chatting.
Me too.
Me too. Thank you. Good night, everyone.